In a war-torn world, an unlikely bond forms between a young girl and a wild wolf. As bandits threaten their village, this extraordinary friendship becomes their only hope for survival. But can the trust between human and beast withstand the chaos of war? Discover the heart-pounding tale of Sophia and Greece as they navigate danger, prejudice, and the power of compassion. Will their bond be enough to save not just themselves, but an entire community?
In the vast forest surrounding the small village of San Lorenzo, a grey-footed wolf moved silently among the shadows of the trees. His amber eyes, sharp and cautious, scanned the surroundings for any sign of danger. The young male, bearing a distinctive scar on his flank, had learned to be wary of humans from an early age. The distant sound of explosions occasionally echoed, reminding the wolf of the war unfolding beyond the boundaries of his territory. Though the forest remained relatively untouched, the presence of conflict was undeniable. The smell of smoke sometimes lingered in the air, carried by winds blowing from the direction of the village. As he hunted, memories of a recent encounter with a young human girl invaded his thoughts. It had been an unusual day, marked by the pain of a hunter's trap and the unexpected kindness of a child. The wolf could still feel the gentle touch of her hands on his fur, tending to his wound with a compassion he had never experienced before. That encounter had challenged everything the wolf knew about humans. The girl, with her large, curious eyes, showed no fear of him. On the contrary, she treated him with a kindness that left him intrigued and confused. Since then, the wolf occasionally found himself watching the village from a distance, torn between caution and a strange sense of connection. The village of San Lorenzo, nestled between rolling hills and dense forest, struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy amid the distant war. The cobblestone streets still echoed with the voices of villagers and the tolling of church bells. But a sense of unease hung over the community. Windows were closed earlier, and anxious glances were frequently cast toward the horizon. At the heart of this uneasy village lived a 12-year-old girl with dark hair and bright, curious eyes. She lived with her grandmother, Carmen, a woman with a wrinkled face and calloused hands from years of hard work. Their modest stone and wood house sat on the village's outskirts, near the edge of the forest. Spent her days helping her grandmother with household chores and exploring the village's surroundings, always careful not to venture too far. Although the war wasn't a constant presence in San Lorenzo, it had brought a sense of caution. Rumors of bandits taking advantage of the chaos to loot isolated villagers circulated, increasing the villagers' concerns. Carmen, worried about her granddaughter's safety, often warned about the dangers of wandering alone. "Times are changing, my dear," she would say, her eyes reflecting a mix of love and concern. "We must be careful, especially with strangers." Nodded, but deep down, a spark of adventure and compassion continued to burn within her. In the weeks following her encounter with the wounded wolf, found herself irresistibly drawn back to the forest. Careful not to be seen, she would sneak out of the village whenever possible, carrying bits of meat and clean water. Her heart raced with each visit, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through her veins. The wolf, initially cautious, began to recognize the girl's presence. He watched her from a distance, his nose picking up the familiar scent now associated with kindness. Slowly, the distance between them lessened. Spoke softly to the animal, her voice a soothing melody in the stillness of the forest. Over time, a unique bond formed between the girl and the wolf. Named her wild friend Greece, after his grey fur. She marveled at the intelligence in the animal's eyes, feeling as though he somehow understood her. For Greece, presence became an unexpected comfort in a world he had always considered hostile. This shared secret brought new light into life. At home, she struggled to contain her excitement, knowing her grandmother would not approve of her forest adventures. At night, lying in bed, dreamed of Grease, imagining him running free through the forest, strong and healed thanks to her care. Little did she know that her act of kindness would have consequences that would change not only her life, but the life of the entire village. Dusk was falling over San Lorenzo when the first cries of alarm echoed through the streets. The bandit attack, long feared, was finally happening. Armed and masked men stormed the village, taking advantage of the growing darkness and the element of surprise. Panic spread quickly, with villagers rushing to take shelter in their homes or the church. On the outskirts of the village, Carmen grabbed by the arm, pulling her inside the house. "Quickly, my dear, to the basement," she urged, her eyes wide with fear. Trembling, obeyed, but her heart was torn. As she descended the dark stairs, she couldn't help but think of Grease and the safety of the forest. In the forest, Grease lifted his head, his ears pricking up at the distant sounds of confusion. The scent of human fear and the echo of screams reached him, stirring an unusual unease in his chest. Something was wrong in the village, and instinctively his thoughts turned to, driven by a force he didn't fully understand, Grease began to move toward the village. His muscles tensed and his senses sharp. He advanced cautiously, keeping to the shadows. As he got closer, the sounds of chaos and destruction grew clearer, and the smell of smoke and fear intensified. Grease knew he was entering dangerous territory, but the memory of kindness urged him forward. Grease stopped at the edge of the forest, his body coiled like a spring ready to leap. Before him, the village he had always observed from afar was now engulfed in chaos. Flames danced on some of the buildings, and screams of terror pierced the night. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to retreat to the safety of the forest. But something stronger held him there. The memory of gentle touch, the comfort of her presence, the trust she had placed in him, of it weighed on his loopy mind. Grease knew she was out there, somewhere in that sea of confusion and danger. The thought of imperil awakened a fierce protectiveness in him that defied his wild nature. For long moments, Grease remained still, waging an internal battle. His instinct for self-preservation clashed with the unexpected bond he had formed with the girl. He looked back at the safety of the forest, and then at the turmoil in the village. Every second of hesitation felt like an eternity. Finally, with a low growl of determination, Grease made his decision. He stepped out from the cover of the trees, entering the human world. His muscles tensed beneath his grey fur, ready for action. With cautious but determined steps, the wolf began his journey through the village, driven by a single purpose: to find and protect. The streets of San Lorenzo, once familiar to Grease only as a distant view, now transformed into a labyrinth of dangers. The wolf moved like a shadow, his steps silent amid the chaos. He slinked between houses and alleys, his sharp senses picking up every movement, every sound, every scent. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and fear, making it difficult for Grease to distinguish individual scents. He desperately tried to catch familiar scent, but the overwhelming mix of odors confused him. Screams and the sound of breaking glass echoed around him, making his ears twitch nervously. As he ventured deeper into the village, Grease encountered new challenges. Panicked villagers ran through the streets, forcing him to quickly hide to avoid being seen. The fear humans had of a wolf could be as dangerous as the bandits themselves. Each time he hid, Grease felt his heart race, torn between the instinct to flee and the need to continue. In a tense moment, Grease was nearly discovered by a group of bandits. He pressed himself against the wall of a house, barely breathing, as the men passed just a few feet away. The smell of alcohol and violence emanated from them, making Grease's fur stand on end. When they finally moved on, the wolf resumed his search, more determined than ever to find before it was too late. In the small house on the edge of the village, Carmen and huddled in the dark basement, listening to the terrifying sounds of the attack outside. Heart pounded, her mind torn between fear of the present and concern for Grease. Carmen held her granddaughter tightly, whispering words of comfort, though her own fear was palpable. Suddenly, the sound of wood splintering echoed above them. Heavy footsteps and harsh voices filled the house. "They're here," Carmen murmured, her face pale in the darkness. Felt her grandmother's grip tighten as they both held their breath, hoping not to be discovered. But their hope was in vain. The basement door was violently opened, and the light of lanterns flooded the darkness. "Look what we have here," a rough voice sneered. Two men descended the stairs, their faces partially covered by dirty scarves. Carmen protectively placed herself in front of, but was rudely shoved aside. "You're coming with us," the taller bandit ordered, grabbing arm. The girl screamed, trying to break free, while Carmen pleaded for mercy. They were dragged out of the basement into the no-roomed living room, looked around desperately, wishing that somehow Grease could hear her, could save them from this nightmare. Grease was near house when he heard her scream. His muscles tensed instantly, recognizing the girl's voice. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the sound, all previous caution forgotten in the urgency of the moment. As he reached the house, he saw through a broken window the scene unfolding inside, and an older woman, whom Grease assumed to be her grandmother, was surrounded by threatening men. The scent of fear was intense, mingled with the aggressive odor of the bandits. A growl rumbled in Grease's throat, a protective fury taking over his being. Without a second thought, he leaped through the window, shards of glass flying around him. The sound of breaking glass and the sudden appearance of a fully grown wolf caused a moment of absolute shock. The bandits, caught off guard, instinctively recoiled. Immediately recognizing Grease, felt a wave of relief and hope. "Grease," she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of fear and joy. Carmen stirred in disbelief, unable to process the scene before her. Grease positioned himself protectively in front of Carmen, baring his teeth in a menacing snarl. The bandits, recovering from their initial shock, exchanged uncertain glances. The leader, trying to regain control of the situation, stepped forward with a knife in hand. "It's just a stupid wolf," he growled, but his voice betrayed a tremor of fear. Sensing the men's hesitation, Grease intensified his growl, ready to defend at any cost. The air in the cabin was thick with tension, with Grease and the bandits locked in a tense standoff. Shielded by the massive body of the wolf, felt a mix of fear and admiration. Carmen, still stunned by Grease's sudden appearance, watched the scene with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was witnessing. The leader of the bandits was the first to act, lunging forward with his knife. Grease reacted with surprising speed, dodging the attack and countering with a swift bite to the man's arm. The bandit cried out in pain, dropping the knife. The other men, seeing their leader injured, hesitated, torn between attacking and fleeing. Taking advantage of the confusion, Grease continued his assault. He moved with impressive agility, snarling and biting, keeping the bandits away from Carmen. The girl, summoning her courage, shouted at the invaders, "Leave us alone! Get out!" Her voice, though trembling, carried surprising strength. The combination of Gris's ferocity and unexpected bravery began to shake the bandits' resolve. One of them, glancing nervously at the door, muttered, "This isn't worth it. Let's get out of here." The leader, still clutching his injured arm, cast a final look of hatred before ordering the retreat. Within seconds, the men fled the house, leaving behind only the echo of their hurried footsteps. With the abrupt departure of the bandits, a heavy silence fell over the house. Gris remained alert, his eyes fixed on the door, ready for any unexpected return. Still trembling, slowly approached the wolf, hesitantly reaching out to touch his fur. "Gris," she whispered, "you saved us." Carmen, recovering from the shock, watched the interaction with a mix of fear and fascination. She said with a shaky voice, "Do you?" "No, this wolf." The girl nodded, quickly explaining how she had helped Gris when he was injured. Carmen's eyes filled with understanding and a newfound admiration for the animal that had risked its life to protect them. The sound of voices and approaching footsteps alerted the trio. Gris tensed again, but recognized the voices of their neighbors. "They're our friends," she reassured the wolf. Moments later, a group of villagers armed with farm tools entered the house, led by the village's burly blacksmith. At the sight of Gris, the men initially recoiled, but then Carmen quickly explained the situation. The story of the wolf's bravery spread rapidly, inspiring the villagers. "If a wolf can defend our people," declared the blacksmith, "then we sure as hell can defend our village." With renewed courage, the villagers organized themselves to drive out the remaining bandits, turning the tide of the battle. As the village mobilized against the invaders, Gris stayed close to, and Carmen, still wary of the presence of so many humans. The sounds of fighting echoed through the streets as the villagers clashed with the remaining bandits. Sensing Gris's unease, gently stroked his fur, murmuring words of comfort. Suddenly, cries of alarm rang out nearby. A group of cornered and desperate bandits was approaching the house. Gris immediately positioned himself in front of the door, ready to defend his new adopted home. Carmen, surprising everyone, grabbed a heavy iron skillet, determined to fight alongside the wolf. The confrontation was swift and intense. Gris attacked with controlled ferocity, taking down one of the bandits without causing serious harm. Carmen, with unexpected courage, wielded her skillet with surprising effectiveness. Inspired by her grandmother's bravery and Gris's protection, helped by throwing objects at the invaders, distracting them. At the height of the battle, Gris was struck by a blow, letting out a howl of pain. For a moment, it seemed as though the bandits might prevail. But Gris's howls served as a final call to the villagers, who arrived in force, finally driving the last of the invaders out of the village. The battle was over, and San Lorenzo was safe. In the days following the attack, San Lorenzo slowly returned to normal, but something fundamental had changed. The story of Gris's bravery spread through the village, transforming the way the villagers viewed the wildlife around them. The wolf, once feared, became a symbol of protection and courage, and Carmen opened their home to Gris, creating a safe space for him at the edge of the forest. The wolf, while maintaining his wild nature, became a frequent presence in the village. Children watched him with admiration from a distance, while adults nodded respectfully as he passed. The experience also profoundly changed Carmen. Her initial distrust of nature evolved into deep respect. She began teaching the village children about the importance of living in harmony with the natural world. "The forest is not our enemy," she would say, "but our ally and protector." At night, often sat on the porch of her house, Greece lying at her feet, gazing at the stars. The war was still a distant reality, but the village now felt stronger, more united. And there, on the border between civilization and the wild, a girl, her grandmother, and a wolf had forged a bond that transcended the barriers between species, showing that compassion and courage can thrive in the most unexpected places. As the seasons changed and years passed, the legend of Greece and the night he saved, San Lorenzo, grew. The small village, once vulnerable and isolated, had become a symbol of resilience and harmony between humans and nature. Travelers would often stop by, drawn by tales of a wolf that walked among the villagers like a guardian spirit. Now a young woman had become the village's unofficial ambassador to the forest. She led efforts to create protected areas for wildlife and taught children about respecting nature. Her bond with Greece remained strong, though the wolf had grown older and moved between the village and the forest with the easy confidence of one who belonged in both worlds. Carmen, her hair now completely white, had become a respected elder. She would often sit in the village square, surrounded by eager listeners, as she recounted the story of that fateful night. "We learned," she would say, her eyes twinkling, "that courage comes in many forms, and that our greatest allies may come from the most unexpected places." The war that had once threatened their lives had long since ended, but its memory served as a reminder of the fragility of peace. San Lorenzo had emerged stronger, not just in its defenses, but in its understanding of the world around it. The villagers had learned to read the forest signs, often forewarned of dangers by subtle changes in animal behavior. Greece, though he never lost his wild nature, had become a symbol of this new understanding. He would often be seen at the edge of the forest, his now graying muzzle raised to the wind, alert for any signs of trouble. Children would wave to him, and he would acknowledge them with a dignified nod, before melting back into the trees. As for, she never forgot the lesson she learned as a young girl, that compassion could bridge even the widest of gaps. She worked tirelessly to spread this message beyond San Lorenzo, traveling to other villages to share their story. And so, San Lorenzo thrived, a beacon of hope in a world that often forgot the importance of living in harmony with nature. The village stood as a testament to the power of unexpected friendships, the strength found in unity, and the profound impact of one small act of kindness. For in saving a wolf, had not just gained a protector for her village, she had sparked a transformation that would endure for generations to come.